January was long, February was insanely short, and now we're in March. That's kind of crazy. 2 romances, 1 productivity book, 1 fantasy book. We're making some headway on our series TBR. Finally read some really hyped books, so I want to talk to you about them. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Sarah, and Coda, my littlest cat, came to join us. This is our February wrap-up. It is crazy that it is already March as I'm filming this. January was long, February was insanely short, and now we're in March. That's kind of crazy. I did read some really amazing books in February. I had an almost 5-star book. So close. Our statistics real quick is I read 4 books this month, 2 romances, 1 productivity book, and 1 fantasy book. 3 of them were part of a series. We're making some headway on our series TBR. Finally read some really hyped books, so I want to talk to you about them. The first one that I finished is Practice Makes Perfect by Sarah Adams, the second book in the One in Rome trilogy. Beg, Borrow, and Steal is the newest one. It just came out, and then the one before this is One in Rome. I have not read One in Rome, but I do have it, and I also have Beg, Borrow, or Steal. I didn't know this was part of that series until I started reading it. I recognized a couple of the characters from the back of One in Rome. That's why I started with this one. I didn't know that it was a series, but it's an interconnected series, so you can read this and learn about Annie and Will without having read One in Rome. I gave this a 4.25 of Sarah Adams' writing. Rule Book is the other book that I read by her, the only other book that I read by her, and I really liked it. I just love her Sarah Adams writer's voice. This is also in a video, reading romances for a week, that I think posted a couple weeks ago. If you want more on this book, then go check that video out. Really loved Annie in this book. I think that she was just such a fun character. She feels like she was what I wish Rory from Gilmore Girls was, if that makes sense. This is about Annie and Will, and it is a small town romance, and their small town is so funny. All of the side characters in their small town of Rome, Kentucky are hilarious, and I was laughing out loud reading some of their conversations. Annie is the youngest of our family that the series is about. Everyone knows her as Angel Annie, so she is the angel of the family, the angel of the town. She owns a flower shop. She's just a nice, sweet girl. That's her reputation around town. She is actually getting sick and tired of having that reputation. She tells Will in this she does not want to be called Angel Annie anymore because it makes her feel like she can't do anything wrong, it's too much pressure for her. She's sort of going through that personally, where she wants to step out of that Angel Annie type view that people have of her. But it's a small town, and when Will starts talking to her, they all kind of let him know hey, that's Annie. If you mess with her, the whole town will be after you type thing, very Rory-esque. It's just that's her personal thing that she's dealing with. And then our male main character is Will, who is the bodyguard of Amelia from our first book. Will is, the classic guy with tattoos. He is known as one of the most attractive bodyguards ever, and famous for that. He meets Annie, and Annie goes on a really bad date, and Will feels bad for her and also kind of likes her a little bit. He offers to be her practice date person, where they'll go on practice dates together, and he'll teach her how to date. I love a good practice dating type trope. Annie feels like she needs this practice because she's been unsuccessful in her dates. Her last date called her boring, which is terrible. So Annie agrees to this whole situation. The story evolves from there. Feelings get involved, and it's one of those books where there is a deadline at the end. One of the characters has a deadline at the end of the book, and it's oh, I can't get attached because I have to do this, and it's I don't know, I kind of feel weird about deadlines at the end of books, where it's okay, you don't have to though. If you really wanted to stay, then you could. I feel books with deadlines just have them to create a conflict, and I feel I like when there's a more natural conflict. So that's why it got a 4.25 from me. Overall, like I said, I really liked the book, and I liked the audiobook. Actually, I listened to half of this on audiobook, and I really liked the female voice actor for Annie, because I feel that was exactly how I pictured Annie, is how this female voice actor portrayed her in the audiobook, so that was fun. I'm definitely gonna finish the series, and I'm definitely gonna continue the series. I loved Annie. She's so funny. She's quirky, but in a funny way. Overtly manic pixie dream girl. She's just funny. I loved her as a character. So that was this book. The next book I read is one of my favorite books that I've had, and that is Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. This is the first book in Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy. I have been absolutely waiting to read this book. This book is actually on my 2025 TBR, so I'm really excited that I finally got to read it. And just like I thought I would be obsessed with it, I am obsessed with it. It got a 4.75 from me. I feel like the thing that it was missing is it got a little slow at like one point, but then it picked up right away and I could not put it down. And I feel like it just didn't give me that like 5-star feeling, but it was so good. And I cannot wait to read the next book because The Ballad of Never After is supposedly everyone's favorite book. I'm just excited to get to that book. But I really did like this book. So basically it is a fantasy. This is our fantasy book. It comes after Caraval. I read Caraval last year, and I wanted to like get through the entire Caraval trilogy before picking up Once Upon a Broken Heart, because you don't have to read the Caraval trilogy to read this series. But if you want to read the Caraval trilogy, then I would recommend doing that first, because this does have like spoilers for the Caraval trilogy. I love Stephanie Garber's writing. I think that the way that she writes is so descriptive and like really puts me in the story, and I love that. That did not disappoint with this book. It's also very fairy tale-esque. I feel like for me, Caraval was like I was in a fever dream. This is like I was in a fairy tale. It was so magical. She has like rose gold hair. There are, you know, fates, and specifically the Prince of Hearts, Jax, is in this book. He is like a main character in this book, and it ends on a big cliffhanger, or like a big revelation. So I'm really excited to see what they do with his character in The Ballad of Never After. I highly recommend this series. Basically what happens is Evangeline makes a deal with the Prince of Hearts, which is a bad idea. You should never make a deal with a fate in this world because they can't really be trusted. It makes her have to be put in stone for a little bit. That puts them on an adventure to the north to meet the prince. You know, Evangeline's seeking to be the princess, but she still owes Jax for a couple of kisses, I think it is. Then because he starts cashing in on those kisses of like her kissing other people, bad things start happening to the people that he wants her to kiss. So she's like, there's something sinister going on here, like what's going on? And then we sort of got a sneak peek at what the main storyline is probably going to be throughout this whole series. Evangeline is part of this overall prophecy, essentially. And we get introduced to that, although the main conflict in here is not that. It's just a really good book, and I can't wait to read the rest of the series. And then I actually read a self-help book, Feel Good Productivity by Ali Abdaal. He's a YouTuber on here actually that I watch, and I listened to it on audiobook entirely. I think it was pretty good. I think I gave it like maybe like a 3.75 to 4 stars, I want to say, as far as self-help books go. I feel like with me, some issues are I don't read a lot of self-help books, but I do feel like some of the information is like regurgitated throughout. The thing that I really liked about this book is that his whole idea is he's explaining his concept of feel good productivity, which is basically if you feel good, you'll be more productive. That's like what it comes down to. And he offers, you know, experiments and step-by-step ways to make things that don't feel good feel better and therefore increase your productivity. I think that it definitely had some good insights into it. He actually started out as a medical doctor, so he had some insights into how he got things done in the hospital and like translating it into how we can get things done in our daily life, which I think is really cool. I just really like that his whole idea is that like productivity comes from joy in doing what you're doing. So that was just a little bit, again, like there's not too much that comes of it besides he gives like a lot of different strategies. I think that if you are into productivity, it could be an easy listen. The next and last book I read is Daydream by Hannah Grace, the last book in the Maple Hill series. I gave it a 4.5 stars. I don't know if it's the last book, but it's the last book that came out of the Maple Hill series. I really enjoyed it. I love the found family in this series. I love that in this book specifically, we see a lot kind of get updates on our last 2 book couples from like Icebreaker and Wildfire, and I would think that's always fun. And it feels like you're like checking in on like your old friends of like, you know, their stories. They give you updates in this book, and I think that was really cool. This is Henry and Hallie's love story. Maple Hill series is a hockey player college romance, and every book is with a different hockey player on the team and whoever their love interest is. This one happened to be Hallie. As you can see, she is holding a book They're in a library and she is wearing a Taylor Swift cardigan. So I related a lot to my girl Hallie. I think she was so sweet. And then there's also Henry, who is mentioned as a character in the other two books. I feel like we hear more about him in the first book because he is Anastasia from the first book's best friend. People were really looking forward to Henry's book because we always kind of knew that there was something different about Henry, just the way that Hannah Grace wrote him throughout the first two books. So people were excited to see like what his love story would be like. What's interesting is in the beginning there's this like a letter from Hannah, and it basically says all she's gonna say is that Henry is neurodivergent. She's not gonna give him a diagnosis. She's not going to say he is a certain thing, just that he is neurodivergent, and a lot of his struggles in this book stems from him being neurodivergent, but also a lot of strengths for him in this book stem from him being neurodivergent, and I feel like that was a main point that Hannah Grace was trying to get across, and I really love that she included that in here. I feel like it's rare that I read a book being neurodivergent myself that I relate so heavily to both characters. Like, I relate to Henry in the neurodivergent sense and how his like brain works, and then I relate to Hallie because Taylor Swift, book lover, people pleaser, oldest daughter. Like, that is basically Hallie in a nutshell. That's where a lot of her struggles come in, is from her being a people pleaser and, you know, the oldest daughter syndrome type thing. It was a pretty thick book. It's like almost like 430 pages or something, and it's a thick for a romance book. But I feel like we got to explore so much of their inner lives, and I really like when authors can do that in romance books, of it's just not totally about the romance. Because I cared about both characters individually and the struggles they were going through individually, I cared about the romance more, and that's why I really like this book. Hallie struggles with doing everything for everyone, never leaving time for herself. She feels like she can't say no, and I feel like she gets taken advantage of from definitely her ex-boyfriend. In this book, her ex-boyfriend is just terrible. You know, there's a little standoff between them. Henry, his like main conflicts stem from how his brain works differently than all of his teammates, and like schoolwork is really hard for him because he can't focus as well unless it interests him. So amazing how like within the first few chapters, Hallie and Henry know exactly what to do for the other person to make their lives easier. They're both just so sweet. I feel like it is also rare to have a book where both characters are just so sweet to one another. There was a conflict in this book, but it wasn't like, A, it didn't feel like a contrived conflict, and B, I feel like it made total sense with the characterizations of the characters that we've been reading about and learning about for the rest of the book. I really think that Hannah Grace did like made a good choice with like making not a contrived conflict. That's like the classic one. How they dealt with that conflict was very telling of like growth in their characters. And like most romances that I read, this is like one of the best found families that I have like seen. Each character is very like distinctive from the other one. I feel like my friends. Like, that's how I know it's a good found family, is I feel like they feel like my friends, and I care about that. So one of the things that really stood out for me that Hallie did is it's really hard for Henry to read his passages for his school because it's not interesting to him. There's a lot of information. He doesn't know what's important. So Hallie actually has a sister who's neurodivergent. So she sort of knows some strategies that have worked for her sister. So she reads all of Henry's papers and highlights the important parts so Henry can write his paper. Like, how amazing is that? And there was just one scene, I think I talk about it more in the continuing series video that I have, where Hallie is just super overwhelmed and super stressed with all of her like saying yes to so many things that she double booked herself, and Henry just without question helps her. I'm not going to tell you exactly how he helps her because it's a little bit of a spoiler, but it's so sweet, and they just know each other so well. I really like seeing just like a nice, sweet romance. That is all the books that I read this month. A little bit of a lighter reading month for me, but I feel like I got so much out of all of these books. I don't mind that I only read 4. I love all of these books so much. They were all like 4-star books for me, besides like the no productivity book. The actual like fantasy romance books were just so good that we read this month, so I'm really excited that we found some really good ones. I think my favorite, of course, has to be Once Upon a Broken Heart. I love all of them. Like, this Daydream's a close second, and then Practice Makes Perfect another close second, but I just feel like Once Upon a Broken Heart, the world was just so immersive and I loved it so much, and I cannot wait to read Ballad of Never After. I have a few books that I'm in between right now that I have to finish first, but I can't wait to read Ballad of Never After. I'm just so excited for that. That is gonna be it from me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!